and welcome to our next lecture on physiological psychology. We're going to do the first part of sort of three parts on movement and movement disorders. The first part we're going to talk about today is on muscles and muscle control. So in this lecture, we'll talk about muscles and their movements, talk about fast and slow twitch muscles, talk about how muscles are controlled by proprioceptors, talk about voluntary and involuntary movements. In our next lecture, we'll talk about hierarchical structure of the motor system, motor tracts, the cerebellum, the basal ganglia, cortex, motor learning, and conscious decision and movement. So we'll start with muscles and their movement. All animal movements depend on muscle contractions. So in pretty much all animals, we have three different types of muscles. Smooth muscles, which control our digestive system and other organs. We have skeletal muscles, which include skeletal muscles or striated muscles. These control movement of the body in relation to the environment. So your biceps, triceps, calf muscles, all of these are skeletal or striatal muscles. Cardiac muscles are heart muscles that have properties of both skeletal and smooth muscles. So they're kind of their own unique beast. So this is pretty much your heart. Everything else is both smooth muscle or skeletal muscle, or what we call striated muscles. They're called striated because they actually are striped when you look at them, and anybody who's ever seen what a muscle looks like, they very clearly have muscle tracts. And we'll talk very clearly about those muscle fibers and how they function. So to get a good look at these, you can see these different kinds of muscle, smooth muscles, skeletal muscles, and then cardiac muscle, which is kind of a combination of both smooth muscle and skeletal muscle. You can see why this is called striated, because they're very clearly striped, which is why they have this kind of look to them. So muscles are composed of many individual fibers. Each muscle fiber receives information from only one axon, but a single axon may innervate many muscle fibers. A motor neuron and the fibers it innervates are what we call a motor unit. So whenever that neuron fires, it will actually cause a contraction of all of the muscles within that motor unit. So we have these neuromuscular junctions, which is a synapse between a motor neuron axon and a muscle fiber. So this is an individual neuromuscular junction, whereas you can see this one neuron fiber is innervating these adjacent these adjacent muscular fibers. So when this neuron fires, it will contract all of these muscles at the same time. So what happens is you get a release of acetylcholine at these synapses that causes the muscle to contract. Acetylcholine is the primary neurotransmitter involved in all of our musculoskeletal system and all of our cardiac muscles. So the reason why, if you have something like an acetylcholine esterase inhibitor, these can cause significant cardiac difficulties, and in fact that's what most nerve poisons are. Things like sarin nerve gas, a lot of pesticides are also in this same category of acetylcholine esterase inhibitors that can cause cardiac disruption. So that release of acetylcholine causes these muscles cells to contract, and that causes the muscle to then have its effect. So we have both muscles that cause different kinds of movement. So an antagonist muscle, so movement requires the alternating contraction of opposing sets of muscle called antagonist muscles. So acetylcholine always excites skeletal muscles to contract. This is how all of our muscles work, but we can move things in many different directions. So we have a flexor muscle is one that flexes or raises an appendage. So the easiest way to remember this is if you're going to flex your arm, you're going to probably be flexing your bicep, and that bicep is a flexor muscle. It's going to pull your arm up. So if you've ever been to the gym and done bicep curls, you're using a flexor muscle to pull your arm up. Now, an extensor muscle is one that extends an appendage or straightens it. So the antagonist muscle to your biceps are your triceps. So your triceps are on the back of your arm, and so if you've done tricep extensions, or if you just think if you're standing upright and you're swinging your arm backwards or moving your arm backwards, say you're going to stab somebody behind you, that would be an extensor muscle. So if you were pulling your arm up to stab somebody in front of you, that would be a flexor muscle. If you're reaching back to stab somebody behind you, that would be an extensor muscle. So the bicep contracts, that would be, again, a flexor muscle. When the tricep contracts, that would be an extensor muscle. So one of the reasons why oftentimes we talk about doing opposing exercises in the gym, so you do contraction and relaxation, and so you can sort of work back and forth on those different muscles. We also have different types of skeletal muscles. We have both fast twitch and slow twitch muscle fibers. So skeletal muscle types range from this fast twitch. These are fibers that produce fast contractions but fatigue rapidly, and slow twitch fibers that produce less vigorous contraction but without fatigue. We have varying percentages of fast twitch and slow twitch muscles, and really depending on which muscles we're talking about. A much simpler example for you to think about is in turkey or chicken. Dark meat is fast twitch fibers. It's the wings and the legs, so the birds are running or flying, or trying to fly, I should say. Whereas the breast tissue is slow twitch fibers because they require less vigorous contraction and don't fatigue. And that's white meat. So for people, we have varying degrees of both fast twitch and slow twitch fibers. So most of our core strength muscles, things that hold us upright, are slow twitch fibers. And so as a result, the best exercises for those kind of muscle fibers are going to depend on doing a different kind of exercise. So you hear people in exercise classes talk about this a lot. So when you go running, for example, those are all fast twitch fibers. You still have slow twitch fibers in your legs. That's what you use to just stand around. So your legs have a great deal of both slow twitch and fast twitch fibers. Your hands and arms, tend to have, again, a mix of both fast twitch and slow twitch fibers, which is why people oftentimes will include very rapid explosive exercising along with slower, more deliberative exercising to sort of incorporate these two different kinds of fibers. But for your core, so we're talking about your abs, oftentimes even your shoulders and back, these are oftentimes a lot more slow twitch fibers, particularly things that are used to hold you upright. And so the most effective exercises for things like your core are oftentimes going to be things like planks, where you have to hold a position for longer periods of time. Whereas crunches are less effective because there are fewer fast twitch fibers in that core area. And so that's something you have to be mindful of. So slow twitch fibers are aerobic and require oxygen during movement and therefore do not fatigue. So non-strenuous activities utilize slow twitch and intermediate fibers, standing, posture, etc., which is why something like planking oftentimes is for that. Fast twitch fibers are anaerobic and use reactions that do not require oxygen but result in fatigue, which is why they wear out much more quickly. So behaviors requiring quick movements utilize fast twitch fibers. So things like throwing a fast ball in a baseball game, it's going to be pretty much all fast twitch fibers, which is one of the reasons why we have relief pitchers, because you can't keep constantly pitching over and over again without wearing out those fast twitch fibers. Interestingly, slow twitch muscle fibers benefit the most from massage. This is one of the reasons why your back, your quadriceps have a lot of slow twitch fibers in them from standing, and really do benefit the most from massage, whereas fast twitch fibers in, say, your biceps, triceps don't get that much benefit from massage. So I want to talk a little bit about how muscles are controlled by proprioceptors. So proprioceptors are receptors that detect the position or movement of a part of the body. So muscle spindles are proprioceptors parallel to the muscle that respond to a stretch. So as you're stretching your muscle, it can then cause a contraction of the muscle. So if you stretch a muscle and it seizes up, that's probably this muscle spindle causing that contraction. So if you've ever had that kind of muscle cramp because you've overextended or hyperextended something, it's probably this muscle spindle that's causing that. So the stretch reflex occurs when muscle proprioceptors detect the stretch and tension of a muscle and send messages to the spinal cord to contract it. So that's what happens when, I don't know if you've had this happen, where you go to, say, stretch your calf out in bed in the morning. I do this a lot because I have very bad plantar fasciitis, and sometimes I'll kind of overstretch, and my calf muscle will seize up, and so you have to just kind of relax it to get it to let go, to get that reflex to let go. So this occurs when you've stretched it too far, and it causes you to contract your muscle. The Golgi tendon organ is another type of proprioceptor that responds to increases in muscle tension. These are located in the tendons at the opposite ends of the muscle, and these act as a brake against excessively vigorous contraction by sending an impulse to the spinal cord where motor neurons are inhibited. If you have ever dropped a weight at the gym, this is the Golgi tendon organ telling you that you have tried to work out too hard. So sometimes you get this muscle failure from this excessively vigorous contraction or excessively heavy contraction, sending an impulse to the spinal cord where motor neurons are inhibited. And so, again, this occurs due to overexertion of the muscle fiber. So if we look here, we have the muscle spindles that respond to stretch, and we have the Golgi tendon organs that respond to increases in muscle tension. And these then go up to the spinal cord, and those inner neurons in the spinal cord can cause these reflexes to happen automatically. So this leaves us with our last topic in this particular lecture, which is voluntary and involuntary movements. Reflexes are, of course, involuntary movements. They are consistent and automatic responses to stimuli. Most movements are a combination of voluntary and involuntary, reflexive and non-reflexive. And so, for example, when you're walking, most of that is generally under voluntary control, the fact that you're walking, but the actual steps involved in walking tend to be more involuntary and reflexive because they're just happening automatically. You don't have to be consciously aware of them. Movements vary with respect to feedback, so some are ballistic and cannot be changed once initiated. So for example, when you go to throw something, once you've started it, it's really hard to stop it, right? Or if you've just done something automatically and initiated a motor response, you have to complete the movement. So if it's something very rapid, that happens very quickly. So for example, if you drop something, you're going to grab it, you're going to do that automatically, and it just really can't be stopped because it's that kind of ballistic movement. Others are guided by feedback. So for example, when you go to open a doorknob, you turn it to see if you're not sure if it's locked, for example. You're not going to just ballistically grab a hold of it and yank it as hard as you can. You tend to break things that way. But you'll turn it to see if you get resistance, and then, maybe jiggle it a little bit. And I'm sure you, like me, have at some point in your life stood outside a bathroom door you thought was locked from the inside that somebody was in, because you went to turn the knob and it was too hard to turn, so you assumed it was locked, and it just turned out it was a stubborn doorknob. That's that kind of feedback-guided movement, whereas a ballistic movement is one that can't be changed once it's initiated. So these are these kind of automatic things that happen. All right, we'll pick up in our next lecture on the hierarchical structure of the motor system.